Jnanatimirandasya. Just now I'm going to say a couple of prayers in Sanskrit where they're asking for clarity and mercy from God to help us speak today and have this conversation. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. That prayer says that I was born into darkness, but my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. So I'm offering my respects to him. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. And those are names of God. And the last phrase that you heard that starts with Hare Krishna is called the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. This mantra, man means mind, and tra means to deliver. So the mind is always full of anxieties. And actually, in our spiritual aware state, we're happy because we exist eternally. And we have nothing to do with all the wranglings of this material world. But because I get connected to so many ideas and desires in this material world, I become full of anxiety. So the mantra helps to raise us to the spiritual platform. And there's three names in the mantra. Hare, try say, Hare, Krishna, Rama. So there's three names, and all of them are names of God. Hare is a prayerful, it's a prayer. It's saying, "Oh my Lord," "Oh energy of the Lord." Krishna is a name for God, which means that he's all attractive. He's the source of everything, and he's the source of all beauty, all wealth, all knowledge, all fame, all strength, all renunciation. And Rama is a name for God, which means that the highest happiness comes from him, and also spiritual strength. So the mantra goes like this. I'll say 2 words at a time, you can repeat. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So by repeating the names of God, one achieves not just peace of mind, but one has communion with God. Because have you ever heard of a school anywhere in the world called Holy Names? Holy Names High School? All over New York, they have schools called Holy Name High Schools. The Catholics have a lot of schools called Holy Name High School, Holy Name this and that. And the reason, because the name of God is holy, sacred. It has all spiritual power. So by repeating it, one can be immediately in touch with God. And this is the basis of the universal religion that was taught by a person named Chaitanya. Can you say Chaitanya? 500 years ago. And he started the movement that we're a part of now, which is a universal non-sectarian movement. People from all different backgrounds and religions can join this to perfect their own practice of religion, which is, religion means to connect with God. And so he brought this forth as the most practical and the easiest way to stay in contact with God all the time is to repeat his names. And so sometimes when you hear the devotees, those who are practicing, chanting, it'll sound something like Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Like you heard, she was chanting very nicely when you walked in. And so that's what she was doing. She's concentrating on her devotion and praying by saying the names of God over and over again. So that's the basis. And then we have books of knowledge, like the Bhagavad Gita. And this book, Bhagavad means God, because it's a name for God. He has many names, but Bhagavan means the all-opulent. one who has all opulence. And Gita means song. So literally, you could say the meaning of Bhagavad Gita is the song of God. And it's spoken by Krishna to his devotee and friend Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And then we have other books. This one's called Krishna. And these are stories about Krishna. So Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. So God has many aspects, but his personality is the highest aspect of. And this tells the stories about how he appeared in the world and things that he did. And they're very beautiful stories, and it's illustrated. You can look at all the pictures that go along with the story. And just by hearing about these, your mind will become attracted, and it's also got philosophy in it as well. So I'm going to read one of the stories from this book called Krishna. And in it, there are a lot of lessons about spiritual life. So I'm going to stop at intervals and talk about those lessons. And the first lesson is about the mood that one should be in to advance in spiritual life. So the chapter from the Krishna book that we're reading today is number 38. And the name of it is Akrura's Arrival in Vrindavan. Now, some of the terminology doesn't sound familiar to you. It's okay, just listen and I'll explain it as we go along to some degree. And we'll also have some time for discussion. Narada Muni did not mention Krishna's killing of Vyomasura, which means that he was killed on the same day as Keshi demon. The Keshi demon was killed in the early morning, and after that the boys went to tend the cows on Govardhan Hill, and it was there that Vyomasura was killed. Both demons were killed in the morning. Akrura was requested by Kamsa to arrive in Vrindavan by evening. After receiving instruction from Kamsa, Akrura started the next morning via chariot for Vrindavan. Because Akrura himself was a great devotee of the Lord, while going to Vrindavan, he began to pray to the Lord. Devotees are always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, and Akrura was constantly thinking of Lord Krishna's lotus eyes. He did not know what sort of pious activities he must have performed to gain an opportunity to go to see Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram in Vrindavan on that day. A pure Vaishnava always thinks himself unfit to serve Krishna. So Akrura began to think within himself that he was unfit for gaining the transcendental opportunity of seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He considered himself as unfit for seeing Krishna as a materialistic person is for understanding the science of God, or as a fourth-class person, a Shudra, is for studying the Vedas. But then Akrura began to think, by the grace of Krishna, everything is possible. And thus, if he likes, I will be able to see him just as a blade of grass floating on the waves of a river may by chance come near the shore and gain shelter. A conditioned soul carried away by the waves of material existence may sometimes be saved by the grace of Krishna. Akrura thus thought that if Krishna willed, he would be able to see him. Akrura considered himself most fortunate that he was going to see Krishna, whom great mystic yogis desire to see. He was confident that on that day all the sinful reactions of his past life would be finished, and his fortunate human form of life would be successful. Akrura also considered that he was very much favored by Kamsa, who was sending him to bring back Krishna and Balaram, and thus enabling him to see the Lord. Akrura continued to consider that formerly great sages and saintly persons were liberated from the material world simply by seeing the shining nails of the lotus feet of Krishna. So this is the book that, the one I'm reading from is a summary and of this book. And I just want to read some of the individual verses from this. And then we can discuss it. So the first verse, Shukadeva Goswami said, so this book is a narration between a king and a great yogi, very advanced spiritual personality. The king had 7 days to live, and he met his teacher, Shukadeva. So this whole book that we often hear from is a recording of the conversation that took place 5,000 years ago between this great teacher named Shukadeva and his student, Parikshit, who was a king. And the king was cursed to die, so he left his kingdom and he sat down on the famous and sacred river called the Ganges. And then he met his teacher, and he asked him, what is my duty when I'm about to die? What should I be thinking of? How should I prepare myself? And it's relevant for everyone in the world because all of us are about to die. We just don't know when. So the conversation goes through many stages, and actually there are 18,000 verses. It's quite a long book. But in this particular section, Shukadeva Goswami is talking about the life of Krishna and how he came into the world. So Krishna means God. It's a name for God. And sometimes people say, well, God can't appear in this world. If that's the case, then we're not talking about God, because when we say God, we mean that God can do anything that he pleases. He doesn't have to have permission, and he can do things that are beyond what we would normally expect to be possible. And so, according to the scriptures, all the great scriptures of the world, God does appear in this world. He makes various appearances. And the reason that he comes to the world is to give people like me, those who have become lost in the material world, a chance to hear about him, to see his pastimes, the things that he does, and to become reattracted to the process of spiritual life, so that we can utilize our God-given body to advance spiritually. So when he's here, he also gives instructions. He speaks about the process of spiritual advancement. And what he says is recorded and passed down through many teachers to their students. And it comes down in a line of teachings we call the disciplic succession. That means from spiritual teacher to disciple, it's passed down in a practical way. Not just philosophically, but there also has to be people who are present, who are actually practicing it to show the example. It's not just theoretical, but it's actually practical day by day, how to live one's life in this world and not be affected by the sinful nature of the world. Because there's a way in which, if one is left to one's own devices, without some kind of help and training and a process to follow, one can become wholly degraded just by the environment. And we see often that people become addicted to many things in this world, and they become forlorn, they become lost, they become depressed, and even in the best of circumstances, people struggle. So the process of spiritual life is meant to give an opportunity for us to advance. As the night goes on, more and more people will be coming in, because most people are working long hours, and then as soon as they get off, they come. Nice to see you all. Thanks for joining us. So here in this beautiful story, this is a kind of an interesting scenario. Akrura, who works for the king. At the time, there's a king named Kamsa, who is a very bad person. And that happens. People who are ill-motivated get into high positions sometimes. And then there's havoc for all the citizens. So this had happened 5,000 years ago. This king named Kamsa, who really didn't have a good bone in his body, he just wanted to dominate and control. And he would do anything to get it. He would kill people, execute them, and so forth, in order to attain his ends, which was to be the undisputed controller of the world. So this is a really interesting situation because Akrura worked for the king because he had to do some work and he was employed in the king's government. But at the same time, although Kamsa was against the idea of God, in fact, he wanted to kill Krishna. That was his main object in life. Of course, you can't kill Krishna because he's not killable. But when someone becomes really worked up and wants to go against God, they get all these ideas that maybe I can kill God and then I'll be God. So that was his main objective in life. And Akrura, on the other hand, who worked for him, was a pure devotee of God. He actually, he loved God and he wanted to serve him. So there's this interesting scenario unfolding before us here that Akrura is being asked to go on a mission to drive his chariot from where he lived in a town called Mathura into a small village called Vrindavana where Krishna was living. And Akrura was being asked to pick up Krishna and Balaram and bring them back to Mathura. And Kamsa even told him, the reason I want you to bring them back here is because I'm going to try to kill them. He had tried in many different ways that didn't succeed, but he still had many plans ahead. He had a gigantic elephant that was trained very expertly, so he wanted to have that elephant at the gateway of the city to meet Krishna and Balaram and kill them in that way. And if that didn't work out, then he had these wrestlers, and he had arranged a wrestling match. And these wrestlers were big and strong, bigger than Killer Kowalski and Ric Flair and all the big time wrestlers. Their names were Chanura and Mushtika. And so and at that time, Krishna and Balaram they were young, adolescents, and they would come, and Kamsa had this idea to kill them. So he said, Akrura, you do this for me, you go and pick up these boys, and you bring them back to Mathura, and I have this idea how I'm going to kill them. So Akrura is a pure devotee of Krishna. The last thing he wants is for any trouble or difficulty to come to Krishna, but still he has this duty to do. He has to drive the chariot and go pick up Krishna and Balaram and bring them back to Mathura for this dastardly deed. So this indicates that this world is complex. Even those who are on the spiritual path may have conflicts, definitely will have conflicts. The nature of this world is that there are conflicts. So Krishna advises in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmanyadaya karmani sangam tyakva karotyaha lipyatena sapapena padma patram ivambasa. Just as a lotus flower grows out of the mud and lives in the water, but it's never affected by the water or the mud. In fact, it never even really touches them. Has a way of doing that. Grows out of the water, it stays in the water. John, have you ever seen a lotus flower? It's remarkable, isn't it? How it stays in the water, but really has this surface that is impervious to the water, and therefore the water just beads off, and it's as if it's untouched, right? So Krishna gives this example that a devotee, a person on the spiritual path who's following Krishna's instruction, has to learn how to live in the world without being affected by it. And one of the ways he says is that the person internally gives up the connection to the world. Externally, he or she may seem very much engaged, but internally, he sees that this is a temporary situation. Now, I'll give you some examples of the kind of thoughts and mentality that a devotee has, because Krishna enumerates these qualities in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in a very nice way. I'll read some of them. This is the Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, starting with text 13 and 14. Okay, so I'll read them out and you can just listen. And if you want, you can watch up on the screen, because he'll be projecting whatever I'm reading also at the same time, so you can follow up there if it's more convenient for you. One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. There's a lot in there, but I'm going to read one or two more. He by whom no one is put into difficulty, and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. Equipoised means that he's not tipped over one way or the other by these dualities. Now, Krishna says, my devotee who is not dependent on the ordinary course of activities, who is pure, expert, without cares, free from all pains, and not striving for some result, is very dear to me. One who neither rejoices nor grieves, who neither laments nor desires, and who renounces both auspicious and inauspicious things, such a devotee is very dear to me. One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contaminating association, always silent and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge, and who is engaged in devotional service. Such a person is very dear to me. There's a lot in there, but there's a way in which Krishna covers many different aspects of the changes. He describes many of the changes that will come to us as we live our life in this world. Sometimes we'll be honored, other times we'll be defamed. Sometimes we'll be too hot, sometimes we'll be too cold. And just as the lotus flower is unaffected by the water, so similarly, all these comings and goings of the material nature, the different social interactions that we have that can cause us distress of mind, these things we have to tolerate because they will come and go. No one can just sail through this world without becoming implicated. Even if you're a perfect saint, you'll become implicated because of, as Queen Kunti says, social intercourse. Because you have to intercourse with so many different kinds of people, you're going to get some grief. And the devotee looks at it as a continuation of, and maybe even a payback from the things that he or she has done to others. Perhaps I've judged people harshly in the past, or I've caused other people pain. So now, by the law of karma, recently, somebody sent me a little clip of a physics professor, and he was doing an experiment with a wrecking ball. Did you see that? And he was showing how momentum works, and he stood on one side of the room and he swung the ball, and he said that it'll always come back. I trust the law of physics as long as I don't put any extra torque on it. It'll come back to here and it won't smash me in the face. So he let the ball go, and it came back and it stopped before it hit his chin, and went on and so forth. A devotee understands that there are laws of action and reaction in this world. And as I'm moving about, as I thrash about from one life to the next, I create waves. Just because of the nature of the world and the way in which I have to survive in the world, I create waves. And they come back to me in different ways. So the devotee tolerates. And we see here supreme tolerance on the part of Akrura. It's amazing, actually, that he's going on a mission from someone who is diametrically the opposite, has diametrically the opposite purpose that he has. Akrura loves Krishna. He wants to serve Krishna. He wants Krishna to be glorified. But on the other side, Kamsa wants to kill him. How does Akrura end up, a pure devotee, end up working for Kamsa? Not only that, he's sent on a specific mission to go pick up Krishna and bring him back to Mathura so that Kamsa can kill him. And what does Akrura does? He goes. And now we get to hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam what Akrura is thinking when he's going about. So this is helpful to us because it gives us an idea how we should be thinking. And this is a very extreme circumstance, and we will also have circumstances. Who knows how extreme they will be. But here it is. Text number 2, Srimad Bhagavatam 10:38-2 says, as he traveled on the road, the great soul Akrura felt tremendous devotion for the lotus-eyed personality of Godhead, and thus he began to consider as follows. So you can imagine the scene that Akrura is driving a chariot. Kids, have you ever been on a chariot? You ever seen a chariot? You've seen a car though, right? It's a modern day chariot. So chariots used to be driven by horses. So now we have engines and we say they have a certain amount of horsepower. That's where it comes from, because people used to drive chariots and it's like 4 horses. Oh, that's pretty fast. And now we have, how many horses? You've got 250. We really need that too, because now, as I drove here today, I couldn't go over 25 miles an hour anyway. And it said in the city of London that the speed that the chariots used to go, that's the same speed we go nowadays, even though we have, because you just can't go any faster. It's kind of, counterproductive, our so-called advancement. In any case, we can see, imagine the scene. I want you all to think about this. Things were made by hand with great care and attention, and the chariot was ornate, and he was going to pick up Krishna, and the horses are pulling the chariot along the pathway, and he's thinking as he's driving. So this also shows, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudyacha. He says, the word tasmat means therefore, because he talks about in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 8:5 in the Bhagavad Gita, that what you think about when you're leaving this world is what you will attain. And then Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Then in all circumstances, in this life, while you have the opportunity, he said, therefore, during this life, you should always think of me. This is the prime objective of the spiritual practitioner, is to think of God all the time. And he says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, that means all the time, mam anusmara yujicha, you should always remember me. And then he's saying that even as you do your work. So someone may say, but my work is so, against spiritual life. Well, what about Akrura? He's being asked to go pick up Krishna to have him killed, right? So that's pretty adverse to what you would consider the normal course of favorable service to God. And so everyone will have some kind of work to do in this world that seemingly is a distraction. But Krishna says, learn to do that work, but at the same time think of me. At the same time think of me. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam, me, anusmara yudyacha. Remember me. And then he tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is the warrior. He's also on a chariot. His work is he's got to fight a war. That's very stressful circumstances on the battlefield. The most stressful circumstances. But Krishna says, think of me, do your fight. He's telling Arjuna, you fight, but at the same time you remember me. Even as you're fighting, you remember me. Mayarpita mano buddhir mami vaishyat yasamshayaha. And Krishna says, if you do that, then you, without a doubt, you'll be able to come to me. So the Bhagavad Gita is it's not written for yogis, or it's not written just for renunciates. Krishna never tells Arjuna, you should leave your work. You should leave the city even, or you should go out to the mountains. Nothing impractical. He's saying, Arjuna, you do your work, you fight, you stay on the chariot, you do the work that's been prescribed for you, but at the same time you remember me. Same time you remember me. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in one of his songs, Grihe tako vani tako shada hari boli tako. That's in Bengali. So what it says is, whether you live in the house or whether you live in the forest, it doesn't matter. But you should always go on repeating the name of God. Shada hari boli dako. You can't forget that part. Sometimes people say, Grihe tako vani tako. It doesn't matter where you live, but don't forget Sada hari boli dako. Because that's the real important part. You have to keep the vibration going. And that's the art of Krishna consciousness, the art of work, is you have to connect everything to Krishna. So here, perfect example, Akrura is being given this task. Now he's on the chariot. He's driving towards Vrindavan. And what's he doing as he's driving? He's not texting, but he's thinking of Krishna. And how is he thinking of Krishna? He says, as he traveled on the road. So the words are gachan. Gachan means to go. Pati. Pati means along the road. Mahabhaga, greatly fortunate. So he's being described as greatly fortunate. So Gachan Pati Mahabaho, I'm on 1038.2. Bhagavati means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ambuja Ikshane, the lotus-eyed Lord. So what's this about? The lotus-eyed Lord. So this is very important, because if one is to think of God, one must have something to think about. One must have some feature, some quality to think about. We'll see in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna wants to know how to think of Krishna. And he asks about, some people say God is an impersonal force. And certainly that's one aspect of his personality, that he has an impersonal side. And so Arjuna asks this question for clarification of how to think of him. Here's the question. It's in the Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, 1st verse, and Arjuna inquires. Here's what he asks Krishna. Which are considered to be more perfect? Those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. And then Krishna answers, the Supreme Personality of God had said, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. So in this verse where Krishna answers, he says that one must think of his transcendental form. So God has a form. And this is also confirmed in the earliest scriptures known to man, called the Upanishads. Hiranmayena patrena satyasya pihitam mukham tattvam pushana pavrenu satyadharamaya drishteye. It's a prayer. And the devotee is saying, please remove the effulgence, the Brahman effulgence, so that I can see your beautiful face. So have no doubt, God has a beautiful face. And how beautiful is that face? If one sees the face or the eyes of God, one can't forget it. One will never forget that face and the eyes of God. And how beautiful are his limbs, what his voice must sound like. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam's described that the beautiful things we see of this world are simply emanations from the mind of God. You see, the beautiful birds of this world. When I was recently in West Virginia, I was observing the peacocks because they kept coming to my door at a place I was staying out in the woods. And I'm just looking how beautiful they are, the intricate design of these birds. And in my backyard in Burlingame, lots of hummingbirds. Tiny little birds with the ruby-throated hummingbird. When it catches the light, there's a flash of almost like pink lightning that comes from the sky. And I mean, who can design a little heart that will fit inside that bird that will beat, a few hundred times per minute? And he can dart up and down and stop and go and things like that. And all these splendors, Krishna says at the end of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, are just a spark of my opulence. And what must be then the original form of God, the primeval form of God? How beautiful. Actually, this is the objective of the bhakti yogis. This bhakti yoga means to develop a love and appreciation for this original form of God, the personal form. And we can see in this chapter we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam that Akrura has this. Because although he's doing his work, and all the work is not something that you'd consider ideal, his mind immediately goes to the form of God. And he's thinking about what he called the lotus eyes of God. So in the Sanskrit, the phrase is Ambuja Ikshane, the lotus-eyed Lord. Ambuja Ikshane, the Lord with lotus eyes. And then it says, Bhaktim, devotion param. He has an exceptional devotion for this lotus-eyed Lord. And then it says, Evam etad achintayat. Thus, evam etat, this as follows, achintayat, he thought. So now we're going to, by the benefit of reading this scripture, we get to enter into the thoughts of a pure devotee who's at the same time he's working, he's doing his work, and now we're going to hear what his thoughts are. Achintayat. What is coming from the chintya, the mind stuff of a pure devotee. So text number 3 says, Kim maya chartitam badram, kim tattam paramam tapaha, kim va tap arhate datam, yadrakshyam adyakeshavam. Here's Sri Akrura thought. What pious deeds have I done? What severe austerities undergone? What worship performed or charity given so that today I will see Lord Keshava. So again, Lord Keshava, there are many names for God given in the Sanskrit, and they all refer to different aspects of God. Just like we have many names, right? So I have, my name is Vaisesika Das, but people call me various other things. And my mother used to call me all kinds of things when I was a kid, and I'm not telling you what they were. But she did, and my brother, I still have two brothers, and they will call me, different names according to our relationship. And I have friends around the world, devotee friends, my friends from back in high school. If I met them, they remember my nicknames from high school. I'm not telling you that either. But our names are numerous, and they have to do with our relationships with others. They have to do with our relationships with others. So Keshava is a name for the Lord, which means that he has beautiful hair. And this is the mindset of Akrura as he's driving his chariot, and he's thinking, how did I become so fortunate? How did I get this fortunate? What did I do to deserve this? Basically, he's saying. Did I do some good deeds? Did I perform severe austerities? Did I do some worship? Charity? Did I give charity? How did I get this service? So if we get some service for Krishna, we should feel very, very fortunate. So this is how Akrura is thinking. How did I get so fortunate? What did I do to deserve this service? Text 4 goes on. Mamai tad durlabam manya uttama shloka darshanam vishayatmano yata brahma kirtanam shudra janmanaha. Since I am a materialistic person absorbed simply in sense gratification, I think it is as difficult for me to have gotten this opportunity to see Lord Uttama Shloka, another name for Krishna, as it would be for one born a Shudra to be allowed to recite the Vedic mantras. So that's some explanation. First of all, the name Uttama Shloka is another name for God. So Uttama Shloka means one who is praised with the highest kind of poetry. There's a lot of poetry in this world. You could say, like rap music is a kind of poetry. And its tendency, in fact, I just heard the other day that every living entity has their own music. And during the rasa dance, every living entity was emitting some kind of music, but every living entity has their own song, their own tune to play. It's the nature of the soul. In any case, there are many different kinds of poetry and writings in this world, but the most select poetry is used for glorifying Krishna. So his name is Uttama Shloka. Uttama means the highest, and Shloka means poetry. So he's praised with the highest kind of poetry. And then he says that I'm a materialistic person. So he's still wondering, how did I get this opportunity to go to see Krishna? He's on the way for this mission. You think about it, it's kind of interesting. It's like, it's his job, he's being asked to do it, but it's service at the same time. So internally, he's thinking, I'm a materialistic person, I don't deserve this. And this is also a telltale sign of a very advanced devotee, that he or she thinks that I'm not qualified. I don't have any good qualities. It's the nature of one who is actually spiritually advanced to feel like this, that I'm unqualified, even though he or she becomes more and more qualified. But there's a sense that I'm a very lowly kind of person. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that one should always be in a humble state of mind. In fact, one should cultivate this humble state of mind, because in that way, one's heart remains open to repeating the names of God and thinking about God. And then he gives this example. He said that there are these different classes of people who are trained for different kinds of occupations. And at the time, there was intense study required in order to go into the Vedas. The Vedas are a huge body of literature, and they're very technical, and one has to learn Sanskrit. And one also, at that time, thousands of years ago, actually had to memorize the verses. Couldn't write them down. There was no mini iPads or anything like that. And there was no even paper. They would do things by memorization. And so those who were qualified to do that would enter into a school when they were very young, and they would live an ideal lifestyle with no exposure to any kind of distractions, where they could really cultivate this fine-tuned brain. And then they would repeatedly study these Vedic mantras and hymns, and then they would start to live them, and they would remember them clearly. And then they would be able to ruminate on the meanings of them and then explain them and so forth. And then there were others who had different natures. They couldn't sit still to do that kind of thing, but they had a warrior nature. So they would go into a different vocation where they would learn the martial arts, and they would learn how to protect people in the society. And then there were others that couldn't stop thinking about making a profit, or cultivating the land and getting the crops going and out to the people and the production line and all these kinds of things. And they would go into a different vocation that would satisfy their nature. And then there was another class of people who didn't want to get involved in all the details, learning all those things. They just wanted somebody to say, do this, and they would do it. And they feel very happy doing that. And they were called the Shudras. So the Shudras never came near the schools where the Vedas were being taught, because they weren't interested. And they also weren't qualified. And so this example he gives 5,000 years ago, he says, since I am a materialistic person absorbed simply in sense gratification, I think it is as difficult for me to have gotten this opportunity to see Lord Uttama Shloka as it would be for one born a Shudra to be allowed to recite the Vedic mantras. So it's like, this is how all devotees feel when they're coming closer to Krishna, that I don't deserve this. And that's true. We don't deserve it. That's what mercy means. Mercy means you're getting something you don't deserve. If you want justice, that's another thing. Don't ask for that. Because if you get that, you might be sorry. We're not asking for justice. We're asking for mercy. Mercy means going over and beyond what we deserve. And that's what God has to give us. He's all merciful and He's all powerful. And in the Bhagavad Gita, you see in the 18th chapter, just near the end, after giving all these instructions about what to do, what not to do, how the material world works, He said, you want a shortcut? Just surrender to me and forget all this other stuff. Just surrender unto me, I'll deliver you. He can do that. It's like the president. At the end of the president's term, he gets to sign this paper. People have to fill out a form at least to ask for clemency. And I have a friend who lives in Los Angeles who's an identical twin. And I kind of grew up with him. He joined the Hare Krishna movement probably around 1972. I joined in 1973. We ended up together in a few places like Chicago. And it was funny because his identical, it was around the time that a lot of protests going on against the Vietnam War and things like that. Well, it just turns out my friend's brother was very active in those protests. And, the government pushed back. In fact, in some places they even killed people. At Kent State, 4 people were shot on the campus by policemen and killed. There was a song about it by Neil Young. I won't sing it. And there was a lot of unrest in the world. And this, my friend's brother was very active in rebelling against and protesting and things like that. And the government was starting to pass these really strict laws about, protesting on campus and things like that. And so during one of the protests, just after some very strict laws were passed, someone had thrown an M80, which is sort of like a large, very large firecracker, 1/4 size of a stick of dynamite. And it kind of exploded, and then there was, they picked him out of the crowd and they arrested him. He got thrown in jail, and they just had increased the penalties for that. So he was going to have to go to jail for 5 years. But he came from a good family, so he got out on bail before he had to go back in jail. It's an interesting story so far, right? So anyway, it gets better. So he was in jail for about a month, and then his parents got him out on bail, and he said, jail life is not for me, so I'm going to jump bail. Jumping bail means you pay a certain amount of money to the system as a guarantee that you're not going to run away, because if you run away, they keep the money. So he said, I don't care about the money. Of course, it was his parents' money. But I can't live in jail. I couldn't survive. What to speak of, 1 month I couldn't practically do it. I couldn't do it for 5 years. I'd rather run away and live a life of hiding. So that's what he did. He hid for about 25 years. Underground he lived. And now keep in mind that my friend was an identical twin. And this fellow was on the most wanted list. And so oftentimes we'd travel together sometimes to distribute books, and sometimes we'd get pulled over, and they'd hold him like overnight always. They'd hold him for extra time because I think we got one here. It's like, no, I'm an identical twin, but they'd have to check out his fingerprints and do this whole thing. So I knew about this for many years. And then interestingly, his brother became a successful businessman. He changed his name and everything, and he got into the health food industry before it was really a big wave. And he made a lot of money, and he ended up in Arizona. And then, I don't know what got into him, but he ran for city council because he was a popular person. And a reporter came in and interviewed him. And, she was digging into his personality because he was running for an office in Chandler, Arizona. And she asked too many questions, and she kind of figured out that he was actually on the run. And he said, please don't reveal, who I am. And she said, I'm a reporter. That's what I do. So they came and got him. They came and got him, and they took him back to jail. And now, because he ran away, now they gave him 10 years. But he got into jail. And just at that time, Bill Clinton was leaving his second term of office. He was in office for 8 years, 2 terms. At the end of the president's last term, he gets a paper on his desk, all the people requesting clemency. Please just let me go without any questions asked. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't, it was a political thing, this and that. So he made the application. He was in jail for maybe another month. Thing went across, it just happened to coincide with Bill Clinton leaving office. Bill Clinton's a very liberal kind of person himself who also protested against the war. He looked at his case and he said, sure, you can go. So they came and opened the cell and said, you can go. You're a free man. How am I a free man? Bill Clinton says you're a free man, you get to go. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, and there's no questions asked. No one can question the president on that. Goes through the process, when it's done, and you're out. And you can skip over the 10 years and so forth. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sarvadharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja ahantang sarvapapebhyo mokshaishami masuchaha. Just ask for clemency. Ask for mercy. Surrender to me. I'll just cut the sentence. You just have to fill out the paperwork and say, I give up. And so that's the recommended process. If one decides to do that, that's a recommended process. So the pure devotee, like Akrura, is considering this mercy of the Lord, that I'm getting some special mercy. In the next verse he says, this is 10:38:5, Maivam mama dhamasyapi syad eva chutta darshanam hriyamana kalanadya kvachit tarati kashtana. Now he has a revelation. But enough of such thoughts, he says. After all, even a fallen soul like me can have the chance to behold the infallible Supreme Lord, for one of the conditioned souls being swept along in the river of time may sometimes reach the shore. So this is a real cause for jubilation in the life of any person in this world, to have this realization that although I'm an insignificant living entity, and although I've been tossed and am being tossed by the waves of time, I now see that it's possible that I could actually go back to the spiritual world. The second that that comes into one's mental system, one's life is transformed. And Krishna gives that information to the soul from within the heart. For one who is sincere about this, Krishna can inform the soul within the heart, and does, that yes, go for it. That's why one suddenly feels this surge of energy that, yes, I should go and find where there are godly people, and I should inquire from them, I should do what they're doing, I should try for this, because Krishna encourages the soul when he turns his head just even a tiny bit and thinks, I could maybe do this. This could maybe happen for me too. He comes out of the darkness of the material world and then considers the possibility of going back to Godhead. And once the mind and the heart have been open to that possibility, there's no going back. And even if one does go back temporarily because of a temporary lapse of memory, still in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni says that person can never live like he did before, or like ordinary materialistic people live, just going on thinking, this is good enough. He remembers over and over again this possibility that I could actually reach the shore of the spiritual world. So here we're privy to the insight of Sri Akrura, the pure devotee, who's having this revelation at this time, as he's driving his chariot towards Vrindavan, that yes, this is possible. And this is what is necessary on a day-to-day basis, to have this encouragement. That's all that's really necessary. One doesn't have to be a great scholar. One doesn't have to be from a high birth. One doesn't have to be physically endowed in any way. One simply has to have this glimmer of hope that yes, I could reach the shore of the spiritual world because God is all merciful and He's all powerful. And I could actually go there too because of His mercy. Not because of anything I have, because I really don't have anything. And I really don't deserve anything. But because Krishna is so kind, I could actually reach the spiritual world by His grace. And again, Akrura says it in such a poetical way. But enough of such thoughts. He's putting behind him all these thoughts that I'm so fallen, I'm so unqualified. He says, after all, even a fallen soul like me can have the chance to behold the infallible Lord. For one of the conditioned souls being swept along in the river of time may sometimes reach the shore. How poetical. Being washed along, swept along in the river of time. Rivers are elusive. You get close to a river, it looks like it's not really moving that much, but if you hop in, you'll find that it actually has a very strong current. It's like the Ganga sometimes. We used to swim across it back in the old days, and you start on one side and you end up way down by Navadvip. The river is it goes on, it doesn't stop. Inexorable, that's the word I'm looking for, inexorable. Inexorable means it doesn't stop for anything at any time. It keeps moving along. And similarly, time is moving us along, one body to the next, one body to the next. And how long has it been going on? Since a time immemorial. No one can count how many births and deaths I've had here in this material world. But this great fortunate time comes in the life of the living entity where he realizes that I have a higher destination and now I can reach it. This is the junction that we'd like to reach and bring others to. Text number 6, Akrura continues, Mamadhya mangalam dashtam palavam shaiva me bhavaha yan namasye bhagavato yogi gyanyangri pankajam. Today all my sinful reactions have been eradicated and my birth has become worthwhile, since I will offer my obeisances to the Supreme Lord's lotus feet, which mystic yogis meditate upon. And you'll notice throughout this entire chapter, as Akrura is progressing, he's thinking about the bodily features of the Lord. So first he thought about the lotus eyes, and now he's thinking about the lotus feet. So in the round, there's, as Queen Kunti, Nama Pankajanabhaya, Nama Pankajamaline, Nama Pankajanetraya, Namaste Pankajangre. She's thinking of all the different indescribably beautiful features of the Lord. And the Lord has beautiful bodily features. So he's meditating like this. Yes, Gandharvika.
So, probably there is no difference between the deity and Krishna himself. So why is it not that we don't, when we come to the temple, we don't look forward and have this type of mood that I'm so fortunate that I'm entering the temple, I'm going to see the Lord, and how do we develop this type of emotions?
You got to bring something. When you come to the temple, you have to bring something with you. So if you go out and you stop in a field, get some flowers, or make something for the Lord, do something, bring him something, then your experience will be different. So it says in the Nectar Devotion, you shouldn't come to the temple without bringing something. So bring something, or bring a prayer. If you bring a new mantra that you learned that you're going to offer. If you don't have anything, really offer yourself when you come in and think about it. Your drive from your house can be just like Akrura's drive. But it can be. It can be. Because it's a matter of, if you're thinking like, I'm going to bring something to Krishna, I'm going to offer something. It's all in the service, because Krishna reveals himself through service, through seva. Atashi Krishna namadi nabhaved grayam indriya. You can't see God with your blunt senses. But Sevon mukihi jivado, if you serve him, if you think of ways to serve him, and interestingly, the service, it says, begins with the tongue. You speak about him, and you chant his names and so forth, then he'll reveal himself. And to the degree that we serve the deity, to that degree, the deity will begin to reveal his different features. So, Akrura then says, today all my sinful reactions have been eradicated and my birth has become worthwhile. So this is interesting too, because the Bhagavatam says, what is the use of a prolonged life without any consciousness of God? And sometimes people want to, Larry King, he wants to freeze his body. Good old Larry, but come on, give me a break. He wants to be cryogenically frozen because maybe they'll make some kind of life, extension of life, and they can unfreeze him and go on. Sorry, Larry, but it's ridiculous. If you're watching, no offense. He may be watching. Sorry. But the Bhagavatam says, better a moment of full consciousness than a prolonged life, which is disconnected. And we get in our life, throughout the entire span, very few teachable moments. Very few. We may get maybe just one teachable moment in our life. And the rest of it is all filler. It's all anxiety. How am I going to take care of my body? What about my in basket? What about my out basket? It's still going to be there when you pass away from your body. It won't go away, no matter how hard you work it. And the only thing the Bhagavatam says that really matters is, how many teachable moments did you get, and how much did you take advantage of them? The yogi really is going about organizing his or her life in such a way that every moment can be a teachable moment. Think of a life like that. Otherwise, I'm simply concerned with maintenance of the body and the mind. And I don't get those deeply moving experiences where I'm actually, from the depth of my soul, calling out and inquiring, how do I reach you? How do I reach the shore of the spiritual world? That's what Krishna responds to, is that deep inquiry within the heart, the yearning to go back home, back to God. There's really no other qualification. And as that deep inquiry begins to pay dividends, and Krishna begins to show the path, then the devotee becomes more encouraged, and as he or she gets a taste for the process of devotional service, develops a greed for hearing about Krishna, and once one realizes that every inch of progress that I make towards the spiritual world is the greatest victory, he or she will not waste a second, and develops a kind of a greed, just as much as an entrepreneur who gets a taste for money and knows how valuable time is. Try to get an appointment with a billionaire. You know what they'll tell you? I don't have any time, because they're really busy making another billion. And the devotee is the same. Try to get a little time, unless it's really related to advancement in spiritual life. He or she will not have, just, yeah, sure, whatever you need. The kind of greed that a materialist has, a devotee has for making ground in spiritual life and inquiring about the Absolute and using every moment to hear about Krishna. So Akrura has this state of consciousness. Next he says, indeed, today King Kamsa has shown me extreme mercy by sending me to see the lotus feet of Lord Hari, who has now appeared in this world. Simply by the effulgence of his toenails, many souls in the past have transcended the insurmountable darkness of material existence and achieved liberation. So, another profound result of this kind of pure devotion, that although he's in the midst of a complicated situation, although he's being sent by Krishna's enemy to pick up Krishna, he's thinking of it as how merciful Kamsa is. And this is what happens to a person who's focused on the goal of going back to Krishna, starts to see everything as Krishna's mercy. As Prabhupada's godbrother B.R. Sridhar Maharaj used to say, in relationship to the verse, Te anukampam susamikshamano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam, which says that the devotee is always seeing Krishna's mercy everywhere, he would say, the environment is friendly. The devotee sees the environment is friendly. I am defamed, friendly, it's good for me. I lose something, friendly. I gain something, friendly. Environment is friendly when one has the goal in mind of going back to Krishna. And now again, he's thinking about the effulgence, and he's saying, simply by the effulgence of the toenails, many souls in the past have transcended the insurmountable darkness of material existence and achieved liberation. Atapite deva padambuja dvaya prashada leshanugrahita evahi janati tatvam bhagavan mahimno the chanya eko picharam bachinvan. This Lord Brahma said in his prayers that if one can get just a little trace of favor from the Lord, then everything becomes possible. You don't need a whole bucket full. Just a trace, a tapite deva from the lotus feet. Padambuja dvaya prashada lesha. A lesha means just like a little whiff, a tiny trace. I mean, it's like if you bring some camphor through the room. You walk through the room with some camphor an hour ago, and there's just a trace left. That's enough. That kind of, just a trace of mercy from Krishna, because he's so powerful, can deliver one from the material world and reveal to one everything about Krishna. Janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno. One can know all the greatness and all the truth about God. Janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya eko picharam vachinvan. We'd like to welcome all the online viewers. Today's class is being streamed live on the internet, and we thank you very, very much for joining us tonight on the broadcast. We feel connected to you, and we're glad you're out there listening to the Bhagavatam. Thank you. Hare Krishna. If we have a number that they can dial in, I'd like to reveal that. Yes? 408-203-2223. It's 408-203-2223. Is that for texting?
Yes.
Okay, so if you want to text in a question or a comment, you can do that. Now I want to reveal something to you very interesting. These prayers and this mood of Akrura as he's going into Vrindavan parallels the mood of Prahlad Maharaj just as he's about to offer prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. Shall I reveal this? Okay. Here it is. Now, Prahlad Maharaj was a 5-year-old boy. What qualification did he have for offering prayers or advancing in spiritual life? So I'll start from the beginning and I'll read the translations from 791. The great Saint Narada continued, the demigods headed by Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and other great demigods dared not come forward before the Lord, who at that time was extremely angry. The goddess of fortune, Lakshmiji, was requested to go before the Lord by all the demigods present, who because of fear could not do so. But even she had never seen such a wonderful and extraordinary form of the Lord, and thus she could not approach him. Thereafter, Lord Brahma requested Prahlad Maharaj, who was standing very near him, "My dear son, Lord Nrsingadev is extremely angry at your demoniac father. Please go forward and appease the Lord." 794. Narada Muni continued, "O king, although the exalted devotee Prahlad Maharaj was only a little boy, he accepted Lord Brahma's words. He gradually proceeded toward Lord Nrsingadev and fell down to offer his respectful obeisances with folded hands." 795. When Lord Nrsingadev saw the small boy Prahlad Maharaj prostrated at the soles of his lotus feet, he became most ecstatic in affection toward his devotee. Raising Prahlad, the Lord placed his lotus hand upon the boy's head, because his hand is always ready to create fearlessness in all of his devotees. By the touch of Lord Nrsingadev's hand on Prahlad Maharaj's head, Prahlad was completely freed of all material contaminations and desires, as if he had been thoroughly cleansed. Therefore, he at once became transcendentally situated, and all the symptoms of ecstasy became manifest in his body. His heart filled with love and his eyes with tears, and thus he was able to completely capture the lotus feet of the Lord within the core of his heart. Prahlad Maharaj fixed his mind and sight upon Lord Nrsingadev with full attention in complete trance. With a fixed mind, he began to offer prayers in love with a faltering voice. Prahlad Maharaj prayed, "How is it possible for me, who have been born in a family of asuras, to offer suitable prayers to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even until now, all the demigods headed by Lord Brahma and all the saintly persons could not satisfy the Lord by streams of excellent words, although such persons are very qualified, being in the mode of goodness. Then what is to be said of me? I am not at all qualified. Does that sound familiar? Prahlad Maharaj continued, one may possess wealth, an aristocratic family, beauty, austerity, education, sensory expertise, luster, influence, physical strength, diligence, intelligence, and mystic yogic power. But I think that even by all these qualifications, one cannot satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, one can satisfy the Lord simply by devotional service. Gajendra did this, and thus the Lord was satisfied with him. If a Brahmana has all 12 of the Brahminical qualifications, as they are stated in the book called Sanat Sujata, but is not a devotee and is averse to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is certainly lower than a devotee who is a dog eater, but who has dedicated everything, mind, words, activities, wealth, and life, to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee is better than such a Brahmana, because the devotee can purify his whole family, whereas the so-called Brahmana, in a position of false prestige, cannot purify even himself. Here comes the final two verses. The Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of God, it is always fully satisfied in himself. Therefore, when something is offered to him, the offering by the Lord's mercy is for the benefit of the devotee. For the Lord does not need service from anyone. To give an example, if one's face is decorated, the reflection of one's face in a mirror is also seen to be decorated. Therefore, although I was born in a demoniac family, I may without a doubt offer prayers to the Lord with full endeavor as far as my intelligence allows. Anyone who has been forced by ignorance to enter the material world may be purified of material life if he offers prayers to the Lord and hears the Lord's glories. So a similar entryway into his prayers, Prahlad Maharaj is saying, I have no qualification. And then he realizes his sincerity. First he realizes the sincerity of another devotee, Gajendra, who seemingly didn't have any qualification because he was an elephant. And therefore he remembered him and he said, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. I'll just be sincere. And it's not for the Lord's benefit anyway, it's for my benefit. I'm offering these prayers. And then he begins to offer. So this is the mood of pure devotion, a revelation that takes place within the heart. Yes, we have a text?
Yes, there's a
Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Sundari Leela Mataji. Thank you very much for the class. One of the questions which drove me to Krishna consciousness was if we have faced the laws of karma, it's so unfair. To pay the price for you don't remember is really unbelievable, but I know this is the truth. Can you please share your thoughts on intelligently leaving blueprints in my karma bank balance during trying situations? Some principles to stay grounded.
Well, one point is that often people ask the question, if I don't remember, if this world is a reformatory and karma is meant to reform me, how is it I don't remember my past activities? I just get the reactions. I don't remember what I did. And there's a couple of answers to that. One is that we don't really want to remember what we did previously, because if we did, we wouldn't be able to live in this world in a peaceful way. I mean, really, no one wants to be disturbed. No one wants to be disturbed. Everyone wants to live sort of a normal existence. And if we were actually aware of the world we were interacting with. For instance, I saw a movie once when I was in high school, and it showed a couple getting ready to go out for the evening. And the woman was combing her hair in front of the mirror. And it was a scientific movie, and then it said, So, isn't that beautiful hair she has? And then he said, let's take a little closer look. And they went with an electron microscope, and like, ooh. Because you get close and then you see the skin follicles and then there's living entities within the follicles and then, it looks like the moon or some kind of desert surface. And then you think, oh, from that perspective, it's really weird and ugly and so forth. But I don't want to see that. I want to see sort of live in the world of aesthetic, illusory beauty, that I'm actually seeing something wonderful. And then, of course, they went to the man and, the skin, and it's something that's like, okay, I've seen enough. That's it. I don't want to see that anymore. And that's really the mood of everyone in the material. I don't want to see that. And so the Bhagavatam says over and over again, pashyati napashyati anupashyati, that you see but you don't see. You see it but you don't see, because you don't want to see it. You really don't want to see what's going on. And as far as memory goes, there are different kinds of memory. It's not that just you remember very specific things like your address from your last life and who you live with, but that's possible. Children do that all the time. In fact, it's recorded at the University of Virginia. There's a department dedicated to the science of reincarnation there, which was funded by the Xerox Corporation, because the owner of that corporation was interested, and he endowed the university to open this department, and they continue to record instances of children that remember their past lives when they're about 5 or 6 years old, and they start talking about them in detail, and then they follow up and they find how all the details match and so forth. But I was talking to Vishnu Gada, who's a psychologist, and I brought up this question about memory. What is it? What is memory? And he said, according to modern psychology, there are many different forms of memory. And some of them are more emotions. We remember emotionally, not that we remember specific images, but there's a way in which, after being in the material world for many, many lives, one may develop a kind of sense, a memory that this place really is just disappointing, and I don't want to be here anymore. This is a kind of memory that accumulates in the heart of the conditioned soul who's fortunate after some time in the material world and starts to develop a kind of restlessness from being in the material world and wants to know more. Of course, it's prompted by a sukriti, a gyata sukriti, or a good fortune of meeting a devotee. And then one gets some real impetus for that. But there's the backdrop of this kind of disappointment with the whole scene in the material world that comes, and that's a kind of memory. So practically, you can cultivate that within your heart. And Prabhupada used to say that, remember that you've wasted so many lifetimes, or you've tried very hard to adjust yourself to the material world many, many times, or even in this lifetime you can think of it. But there is no permanent adjustment here. And therefore you should resolve yourself that I will use this one life. Why not? It's going to go away anyway very quickly. Why not use this as in full investment in going back to the spiritual world? Give it a try with all one's heart. So Akrura will continue on his journey, and there's much more to be said about the way he thinks and speaks and the prayers he offers as he goes into Vrindavana. We'll go into that a little bit more in a while or later. But for now, we'll take some reflections or questions. Reflection means any one thing that you heard that's stuck in your mind, or if you have a question, some clarification you want. And it doesn't, yes, go ahead, Vital.
Prabhu, on the two prayers that you just showed, in 1038.3, Akrura seems to say that, okay, he's thinking, what's the austerity I have performed that I have now got this service? And Prahlad Maharaj in 799 says that, okay, no austerity or any charity or anything can get me devotional service. So these seem to be two different ways of thinking, right?
Well, not really, because it's a sentiment that that Akrura is presenting, saying, what could I have done that really brought me to this position? In the Gita, Krishna says, Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohanir mukta bhajantimam dridavrita. That only those who have performed pious activities in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful activities are eradicated, can take with full determination to the process of devotional service. But according to the Bhagavat teachings, there are different kinds of sukriti, of pious credits that one gets from various kinds of association, mainly in this world. Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes how there's sukriti one gets that qualifies one for material advancement. You get that by associating with Donald Trump. And those may also get qualification for merging into the Supreme Absolute, for becoming a Jnani by association with who? And then there's Bhakti Unmukhi Sukriti, that is a very rare and special kind of sukriti that one gets by associating with a pure devotee in this life or previous life, and one gets unknown credit for that and is able to advance. So anyway, in Akrura's mindset here, he's really sort of questioning, how could I have gotten to this position? It's not that he's necessarily saying that, because of my previous austerities, I've come to this position. But even the Shastra says, Aho bata shrapachato garyanya jiva grevartate nama tubhyam te pustapaste juhuvu sasna arya brahmanachur nama grananti te. That it's considered that if one comes to devotional service, if one is able to chant Hare Krishna, say the names of God with feeling, then he's done all these kind of austerities before. He's previously performed all these, just as much as if you come in and you see a judge sitting behind the bench, you go, he went to law school. He's done that. He's gone through the process. Yeah, like that. And let me just look at, you said it was the third verse?
1038.3.
1038.3. We'll just look really quickly and see if Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has to say anything. What kind of pious deeds have I done? What severe austerities undergone? What worship performed or charity given, so that today I will see Lord Keshava? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Akrura happily reflected, what have I possibly done to be qualified to see the Lord? So he classified it as a happy reflection. How did I become qualified for this? Yeah, like that. Another one?
Yeah, one more, please. So, in the beginning of the class, you were talking about the conflict that Akrura has to go through, that as a devotee, he has to do this service of bringing Krishna to Kamsa, to have him killed. You were also saying that how he did this as a duty, and also you were saying about the equipoiseness. You mentioned about that. But regarding the first point on duty, we see that devotees like Arjuna, Vibhishan, they actually thought that their highest duty is towards Krishna, and they rejected their material duties of fraternity or nation or patriotism, so-called patriotism and all, right? But in Akrura's case, it doesn't seem to be that, right? He seems to have given importance to his duty towards the king as well.
Well, actually, here he's saying it's special mercy. I'm lucky I have this job because now I'm meeting Krishna. So he's seeing that the two things are intersecting. His duty is somehow or other, by good fortune, connecting him to Krishna. And later on in this chapter, he'll say, although I have to do this work, bringing Krishna back to Kamsa, and although it seems externally to be like a really bad thing, he said, Krishna knows my heart. He knows what's in my heart. In fact, this is a very important section for devotees. I'll just read you that, if I can jump ahead a little bit. He says in text number 18, the infallible Lord will not consider me an enemy, even though Kamsa has sent me here as his messenger. After all, the omniscient Lord is the actual knower of the field of this material body, and with his perfect vision, he witnesses, both externally and internally, all the endeavors of the conditioned soul's heart. Isn't that nice? Purport, being omniscient, Lord Krishna knew that Akrura was only externally a friend of Kamsa. Internally, he was an eternal devotee of Lord Krishna. And I'll read you Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on that because he has more to say. Text 19. Vishwanath says, Akrura thought, will Krishna not... Oh, wait a minute. What verse was it? 18, okay. Vishwanath says, though all this is true, Akrura still feared that it would be impossible to get Krishna's mercy. Therefore, he refutes this idea with this verse. Akrura thought, though I am Kamsa's messenger and have been sent here, been sent by him, Krishna will understand that I am not his enemy, because he is present both outside and inside my heart. Krishna witnesses not only my activities, but the activities of everyone in this universe. Each case is a little bit different, but the point is that there's always some complexity. Yes? Texts?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay.
One is from Hansapriya Mataji. She says, Radhe, Radhe. And then the point is,
Radhe, Radhe.
what you live up to, you will attain. And that's...
What you what?
What you live up to, and then she says, you will attain, I think. That's something that she heard in this lecture, and she would like to have this as a meditation this week.
Like how you live your life, that's what you'll accumulate as your consciousness, and you'll attain that.
That's how I understand it. And another question, there is no name who asked us, but the question is, does Krishna forgive sins? I guess you
Does Krishna forgive sins? Yes, very much so. Supada mulam bhajata priyasya tyaktanya bhavasya hare priyasaha vikarma yachchot patitam katanchid tunoti sarvam hridi sannivishtaha. The Karabhajana Muni in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam says, for one who takes to devotional service, to serve Krishna's lotus feet, supada mulam bhajata priyasya. Tyaktanya means that the person is in the process of giving up the material world. Tyaktanya bhavasya, his bhava, his mood is to give up everything for Krishna. Tyaktanya bhavasya hari priyeshaha, he's very dear to Krishna. He's very dear to Krishna because his mood is to become surrendered devotee. However, vikarma kinchit, that but somehow or other, if that person is engaged in vikarma, he makes a sin, then the rectification is to go on performing devotional service, because Hridi Sannivishta, Krishna has entered within the heart of the devotee. He knows the heart of the devotee, that he repents. He didn't mean to make the sin. It was by force of habit. There were different ways that somebody can fall down. Different ways that somebody can fall down from the path of devotional service and make have an indiscretion because of past habit, because of bad association. So many things can happen. Unintentional, sinful reaction, sinful activity one can perform And yes, the verse says that Krishna forgives that person as he just goes on with the process of devotional service. In fact, it's specifically about how there's no need for prayaschitta, for reforming oneself to counteract that specific sin, because Krishna makes up for it. There are many more, but I mentioned earlier, sarvadharman parityaja. Yes, Krishna forgives all the sins that were previously done if one simply takes shelter of him. And all the debt is wiped out too. Devarshi bhutapna nirnam pitranam nakinkaro nayam rani charajan sarvatmana yasharanam sharanyam kuto mukundam paryahritakarta. That everyone's born as a debtor. We owe to the devas, to the pitris, to all, because of our previous because of just the way we live in the world. It's a world of exploitation. I'm always taking. I have to, just to live. I have to breathe in living entities. I have to take from the environment. I'm sucking off the environment. And I have to pay for that. So I'm a big debtor. I'm walking around with a big debt. But, and you have to pay for that. But if you surrender to Krishna, then he's Mukunda. He absolves you of the debt. Yes, another question. Or reflection.
I have a reflection. I really like the point which you mentioned that if we consider our jobs to be really pathetic, that we cannot remember Krishna, think about Akrura's job. And also in the class you mentioned that how, despite of the circumstances, he was depending on the mercy. So I was just reading Radhika Raman Prabhu and Krishna Kshetra Prabhu's book, the Bhagavad Purana Living Tradition. And in that he starts off the introduction with the Samudra Manthan pastime, in which every moment now and then something or the other was happening. And the demigods were just turning to Vishnu. And in that he mentions that human beings are weak. And the Bhagavad Purana acknowledges this in every instance. And then he says that it upholds its precept that divine grace is what helps people cope with and overcome failure. And then he goes on explaining how weaknesses come and then different personalities in Bhagavad Purana take shelter. So just connecting it's
That's very nice. Yeah, very nice to understand that human beings are weak. Human beings? Yeah, human beings are weak. And that Krishna knows that. Of course, at no time should one develop an entitlement mentality, because then one becomes offensive. Because this can also develop. It can actually develop into a doctrine, and has in history, that the flesh is weak, and therefore I can't reform myself. I won't try to reform myself. I shouldn't even try to refrain from sinful activity because the flesh is weak. And God's so merciful that he doesn't care. That's a philosophy, right? And so, in the Shastra, it's acknowledged that we have a weakness. But it's also stated that by incremental improvement, by the mercy of the Lord, by practice and by detachment, one should become strong. One should actually develop yoga balena, and that ultimately one's responsible for that, to overcome the weakness. I mean, nothing's more annoying than someone says, I can't reform myself. Later, I'll do it. And, and just won't move. It's annoying, to say the least. I mean, especially in myself. It's annoying. It's annoying. So we don't want to annoy Krishna. We should do our part. And in fact, that verse, Jatashado matkatasu nirvina sarvakarmasu veda dukatnakam kamans prityage pranishvara. The 11th canto says that, there's this situation one may be in where he's disgusted with the material world. His faith is awakened. He knows that all kinds of sinful activities and material activities lead to misery, but still he can't control himself. There's a Parityagyapanishra. He still doesn't have the power to give it up. Then Krishna goes on to say that still one should happily remain on the path. Don't give up. Continue going on. And repent repent that one can't, or regret the fact that one can't do it perfectly. And gradually one will come to the perfect stage. Yes.
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for bringing such a wonderful prayers. And I particularly like one point that Akrura makes in that how sometime you come to the shore, and then you are told that how it is possible. It's not this is that becoming a pure devotee and perfecting your life. It is possible. It's not something that imaginary concepts. So I like your.
Look up. Can you do a search, Ramananda? Bhavite. Look up the words bhavite. Do a search and put quotation marks around bhavite. I'll show you a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I think you need to put quotation marks around them. No, around both of them. That'll do it. Should be in the Chaitanya. There it is. Madhya Lila 19:236. Bhavite Krishna spure antare, Krishna kripai agnapai rasha shindupare. When one thinks of Krishna constantly, love for him manifests within the heart. Even though one may be ignorant, one can reach the far shore of the ocean of transcendental love by Lord Krishna's mercy. So I've always appreciated this verse, bhavite. In this way, when one is strictly in thought of Lord Krishna, spure antare, it manifests within, Krishna kripai, by Krishna's mercy. Agna, even though one's not expert in knowledge, pai reaches Rasha Shindupare, the far shore of the ocean of transcendental mellows. That world is there, and I'm on this side of the ocean. How do I get there? If one goes on with the process of hearing and chanting and doing service and remembers Krishna, then by his mercy, it manifests within the heart. You can reach. This is exciting. There's nothing more exciting than this, to realize that, yes, I can reach that far shore. By the mercy of Krishna and Guru and the Bhagavat, all of them are helping me. These are all what Krishna says, Mayana kulyena nabhasvateri tam. These are favorable breezes. You've got the boat already. Hridehamadyam sulabam sadulabam plavam sukalpam guru karnadaram mayana kulyena nabhasvateri kam. You've received a human body, which is a ship. It's a boat. And you need to have a captain to direct you. You've got to have a captain. And then you have to have favorable breezes, which is all these instructions coming from Krishna. Do we get any more text? Okay. Yes?
Yes, Prabhu, I have a question on the same thought. Like, what is the difference, or which, thought can dominate? So one is like you get able to perform the devotional service through the mercy of Krishna, and same time it is also your volunteer choice, like
50-50. 50-50. Just like in the story of Mother Yashoda chasing after Krishna to bind him. He couldn't be caught. Then when he was caught, he couldn't be tied. 2 inches too short. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that 2 inches is meaningful. It means 1 inch was the endeavor of Mother Yashoda. The other inch, Krishna's mercy. 50-50. Ramananda Saka Prabhu, could you come out here, please? I'd like to acknowledge the excellent booth work done by Ramananda Saka. So this is a career, actually, living in that booth. And it's open to other devotees who are learning Bhakti Shastra, who are going through the scriptures. It's not easy. You know, first of all, you have to learn how to use the database and obviously Google. And, you know, there are ways of searching that you have to learn how to do. And we want more devotees to learn this under the tutelage of our very own Ramananda Saka, who's just flown through all the all the classes and everything like that, and has developed, along with Nilesh and others from the ground up, this whole system of broadcasting out of the booth. It may look like a small booth, but throughout this building there are millions of wires. And he oversaw the placement of all of those. So those who would like to be more involved in this service, he will train you up if you want to volunteer and come into the booth at some time and practice listening to the class and at the same time watching the TV cameras. If you ever dreamed of being a TV producer or something, now's your chance. But this is highly spiritual. Then you look up the verses and bring them on the screen. So thank you again, Ramananda Saka Prabhu, for bringing this great service, being on the cutting edge of this kind of service, which is serving people all over the world, and not only in our live studio audience, but also to all the wonderful devotees who are out online, taking their time to listen to Krishna Katha through the computer, which is otherwise a source of distraction and which takes one down to the darkest regions of hell. Hare Krishna. And also, somebody really quick, as quick as you can, bring me a Tattva Sandarbha, please. If you can produce a Tattva Sandarbha within 30 seconds, I would highly appreciate it. We have this weekend coming up, all of you online. Please note that we have a very special program this coming weekend. We have a brilliant devotee who we've made arrangements. He's very hard to get, but we've arranged to fly him in. He's coming in on Friday night to give a seminar on Saturday and Sunday. And the seminar, this devotee is very qualified. He was born into a devotee family and trained from the time he was a child in the Bhagavat. He learned to read from the Bhagavatam. And he has very realized intimate knowledge. He's a young man, but he always has a PhD, and he is a full-time professor. Very specifically, he wrote his doctorate thesis on Jiva Goswami, one of the great acharyas in our line, who's very important to us. The teachings of Jiva Goswami are vital to our entire sampradaya, and everyone should know about him, and they should know the teachings of Jiva Goswami. Recently, this book, Tattva Sandarbha, which was one of Jiva Goswami's very important books, has been released and is available for the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. And we'll be distributing 100 copies of this starting tonight for those who want them. They are, how much, 25? $25 for the Tattva Sandarbha. This was a book translated and given commentary by Gopi Puranadana Prabhu, who was personally trained by Prabhupada in how to translate Sanskrit, and he was a brilliant genius in language. Even before he came to the Krishna consciousness movement, he was in linguistics a genius, and going, I believe, to Columbia University. And then he put all his heart and soul into the Vedic Shastras and became one of the great Sanskritists of our movement. Very unfortunately, for us, he left his body at Govardhan last year. He did leave behind this Tattva Sandarbha, which the devotees in the Sanskrit school brought out and is now published. I read the entire book last year while I was sitting in Vrindavan, and it's riveting, it's important, it's stunning. Everyone should have in their library for reference. The other Sandarbhas, it's the Sat Sandarbha, so there are other 5 that will come out after this. This is the most important one because it establishes why Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What is the evidence? And how do we derive our authority for making such statements? And why is it that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the ultimate authority in Scripture and so forth? These are very important, basic questions. If we are only talking to people who have no idea about what Krishna consciousness is, we may not visit these points. But as soon as you start to talk to people who have any kind of background in Vedic knowledge, you'll need to have this in order to progress in your teaching of Krishna consciousness around the world and to become a guru. You have to become a guru. This is the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everyone must become guru. So you have to read this book. We have 100 copies. They're $25 each. We're going to dispense them over the next couple of days. If someone wants to text in or call in, you can order your copy. Once they're gone, because they only printed a certain number. They only print limited amounts of these. So don't hesitate, because they're going to go fast now that we're bringing them out of the cases. The seminar begins on Saturday morning at what time? 8:30, and it goes to 11, and then there's a break. And then he picks it up again on Saturday for another couple hours, and then on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. till 1 o'clock. So Saturday, Sunday, don't miss it. Be here live to see Radhika Raman. He's fantastic. He's a very humble soul, but he's highly learned, and not just in book knowledge. He has deep realization. I just saw him speak in New Vrindavana, and I have to say it was one of the best classes I've ever heard in my life. That's why I was so eager to get him out here. And we'd like to have such speakers come in regular rotation to ISV, so show up. And please be here. Bring all your friends. Let everybody know. It's short notice, but bring people, because they will be impressed and they will learn a lot. And while you're here or there, wherever you are, pick up a copy of the Tattva Sandarbha. Tattva Sandarbha. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Yes?
We have got an order for 2 Tattva Sandarbhas. Hansapriya Mataji.
Hansapriya took 2, and only 98 left. Okay, thank you very much. And now we're going to have an artik ceremony, so we'll put away all the asans. And we're going to sing for Krishna, and just after that we're serving dinner to everybody, a special prasadam cooked by, and I won't announce who did it because Avantika's here. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.